From the European Parliament in Brussels, this is Raw Politics. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is what we have on the program. Austria scandal. Far-right politicians up and quit the government in the wake of a Russia corruption scandal. Right to die, the man at the center of an emotional debate on euthanasia in France and beyond. Diplomatic duel. Guy Verhofstadt challenges Matteo Salvini to a debate 2 days before Europeans go to the polls. Rescue fines. The UN condemns an Italian proposal to fine those who save migrants and refugees at sea. And political milkshaking. Nigel Farage becomes the latest victim of a viral trend. Thanks again for joining us. Now it is time to meet our panelists this evening. We have, of course, Darren McCaffrey, our political editor here at Euronews. Darren, what are you watching tonight?
Well, clear the Colosseum in Rome. We could be seeing a duel between two of the titans of European politics, Guy Verhofstadt and Matteo Salvini. Guy Verhofstadt's put forward this suggestion. I think in many ways it would be fascinating, though unlikely it will actually happen, given that they, in some ways, epitomise the battle that we're seeing play out days ahead of these EU elections.
Don't say not yet. 48 hours left.
If they want to come on Euronews and do it, they're more than welcome to.
Absolutely. OK, joining us tonight as well, Beatriz Rios. She's a reporter for Euractiv. Beatriz, what about you?
I am looking at the fines and NGOs, the threat from the Italian government. I think it gives you a sign on how is deteriorating the migration policy at the European Union. And I think it's really dangerous to accept that it's normal to impose fines and people are actually saving people's lives.
All right. And also bringing him back from yesterday, Oliver Grimm, who is a Brussels correspondent for Austrian newspaper Die Presse. Thanks again for being with us today. So the story you're watching closely would be...
Well, in the story, nobody can stop watching in
Yes,
Austria
absolutely.
is, of course, the effondrement, the dissolution of the government, and the question whether Kurz himself, the prime minister, might stay on, or whether he won't survive a vote of no confidence next Monday.
All right, it's a saga that continues, and that is exactly where we are starting tonight, because with a growing political crisis in Austria, the Chancellor, Sebastian Kurz, could face a no-confidence vote as soon as Monday, just a day after European elections. Now, this as ministers from the far-right Freedom Party resigned after Kurz sought the Interior Minister's dismissal. The president accepted the resignation apart from the foreign minister who wanted to stay. Now, the political turmoil started with a video which appears to show the Vice-Chancellor Heinz-Christian Strache offering government contracts to a woman posing as the niece of a Russian oligarch. Strache has denied any wrongdoing. Now, the EU Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker spoke to journalists about the crisis in Vienna earlier today, and this is what he had to say.
Also ich habe diese Regierungskrise nicht ausgelöst und bin auch nicht nach Wien gekommen, sie zu begradigen. Das müssen die Österreicher selbst tun. Am nächsten Sonntag ist Europawahl. Das ist der Tag, den man gut nutzen kann, der Gefahr von rechts den Rücken zu kehren.
All right, Oliver, you're watching this closely, so developments today. Any of this surprising to you?
No, not at all. The ministers of the FPÖ had actually announced yesterday they would resign in case Kickl, the Minister of Interior, as you said, is being dismissed by the president, which happened today. So they stepped down yesterday. Today, the president accepted their resignations, except for the foreign minister, Madame Kneißl, who wants to stay on.
Is it absolute chaos now in the Austrian government?
Well, I mean, I don't really see any government right now. However, I mean, the good thing is this is, for all its weaknesses, it is a well-functioning state, a well-functioning democracy. It's a place where you have rule of law, where you have a constitution. And the president framed it very beautifully. He said, well, this is, of course, an extraordinary situation, but today we see the beauty and the elegance of our constitution.
And of course, a part of the story is the Russia angle. We saw reaction from them. Pretty much the gist of the reaction is, well, don't look at us. We had nothing to do with this.
Well, here the thing is that if you look at the far right in the European Union, you see a divide. There are some political parties that have a strong link with Russia. We have seen that with Marine Le Pen. We have seen that with Salvini. And then you have other political parties on the eastern countries that completely oppose this narrative. So it's going to be interesting to see how they place themselves in this crisis, also at European level.
Yeah, Darren, you wanted to jump in.
You know, I was just simply going to ask, we were talking last night about there could be elections in September. If there is a vote of no confidence, those elections get brought forward, or what happens to the government? What happens to Sebastian Kurz if there is a vote of no confidence?
To be honest, I'm not a constitutional expert. First of all, I think the vote of no confidence is very likely going to fail. It's going to be put forward next Monday at an extraordinary session of Parliament. You would need the FPÖ members of Parliament and the SPÖ members of Parliament, and also a small opposition party called, I think they're called Liste Pilz right now. They changed their name several times. Basically, it's former Greens who fell off the party in an internal struggle. However, the SPÖ is split on this. Within the SPÖ, so the Social Democrats, you have the left wing who really wants that because they smell blood in the water and they want Kurz down. The more reasonable Social Democrats, and I think that's the majority, are rather wary because they don't want to add to this victimization narrative that is being built up.
I mean,
by
of course,
the FPÖ
this is
as
something
well.
that's happening in Austria, but definitely the reactions go far beyond the borders of Austria. Everybody is watching the implications of what is happening there. Now, joining us from Barcelos for more on this topic is Portuguese MEP Ana Gomes, who sits with the Socialists and Democrats group. I mean, you know, clearly there's a lot of voices already saying, oh, we told you so. That's what happens when you work with the far right. But look, clearly Kurz defended having worked with the far right and said, we had pushed through good reforms in the past 17 months. Wouldn't you give credit where credit is due, Anna?
No, indeed, I think this teaches a lesson. I hope it teaches a lesson to mainstream parties, namely from the EPP, that they cannot go to bed to government with extreme right-wing parties, because obviously this backfires, as this crisis in Austria shows. And they should know in Austria, it's not the first time. So I hope this, all the other mainstream parties in the EPP, and Mr. Manfred Weber himself, who went for too long supporting and tolerating Viktor Orbán in his own party, will indeed take the consequences. That this is putting yourself at the mercy of corrupt, captured people who are being orchestrated, be it by extreme right-wing in the US, those that are now represented by Steve Bannon, but as well by the regime, the autocratic regime of Putin. And we don't need that in the EU at all.
Okay,
we
so
need to fight for a democratic, genuine EU.
So you don't see any practical purpose for anyone partnering with the far right, but at the same time, is shunning them out really the way to deal with this? I mean, this is not, shunning them out is not going to stop people from voting for them or agreeing with their politics.
Well, the question is, we need to fight the narrative instead of follow the rhetoric and the agenda of the extreme right wing, as many mainstream parties have been doing. And that's why people are where they are. We also need to reclaim European policies that are genuinely pro-European, not these austerity policies that have undermined, that have alienated the European citizens. And that's why they are now more prone to listen to the extreme right-wing ideologues. We need to go for that fight, and we don't need opportunistic alliances, because in the end they backfire. They create crises like the one that Austria is now experiencing.
All right, thank you. Ana Gomes, Portuguese MEP there talking to us. Thank you. All right, so is this, what's happening in Austria, is it being taken advantage of by centrists and leftists? Now they're saying, again, the message, I told you so.
I think it's going to be taking advantage of it. And it's
Are they right to do so?
Yes, of course. But I find particularly interesting that we're having this conversation only because of this case of corruption and not for the other policies that has been put forward precisely because of the FPÖ and the government. But I think it's going to put the EPP particularly in a very difficult position, because they're going to decide whether or not they align with the far right and they make alliance with them, when you're actually seeing what are the consequences of making a government with them. And then at the same time, it puts the far right in a very difficult position because of what I mentioned before. Because you have different political parties that are closer or a little bit far away from Russia, and they're going to have to make a decision too.
I mean, Dari, we talk about this, the keep them close enough, because otherwise they would be stronger together. Is this, as Anna was pointing out, stop with the opportunistic partnering with?
Well, I mean, first of all, to take on Anna, I mean, I think there's an element that she says that you need to take on the narrative. Well, at the moment, you could argue that the centrist ground is losing the argument, particularly the centre-right. But then the centre-right has always been a broad church, and this is what you have to understand about our politics. I mean, the EPP itself has always been a broad church, and given the pressures that we've seen from the financial crisis and the migration crisis, politics has fragmented even more in many parts of Europe. But, you know, 20 years ago, when we talked about conservative mainstream parties in Europe, that included an element essentially of what we would describe as the far right, people who were concerned about migration, who believed in nationalism over the European project. These forces are not new in politics, it's just that previously they were inside the tent, they have now fragmented to be outside the tent, and yet the centre ground then has to ask the question, are they willing to work with them again?
Yeah, and where should they be staying? Okay, I want to ask you, Oliver, in terms of Austria, do you think this is going to change the direction that Austria is going to take in terms of coalition building? Because as Anna pointed out, it's not the first time that this has happened in Austria in terms of partnering with the far right. Is this going to change the direction that Austria takes?
I think it's a bit early to make a final judgment about that question. I do think it has alerted many people in my country to the fact that democracy is a daily negotiation. Democracy, the rule of law, a republic, that isn't something that you're given and then it's stable. It's something you have to take an active part in. I would, however, argue that the problem isn't only with the EPP. I don't want to defend them, but I'd like to remind people that actually the first ones who went into a coalition in Austria with the FPÖ were the Social Democrats in the 80s. And already in the 70s, Kreisky, the legendary Austrian chancellor, actually got into his office, into power with the parliamentary support of the FPÖ, which at that time really was run by a former SS officer.
Right. So clearly it's too early to
argue
say
it's only a problem for one political group is a bit iffy.
And we have to remember that when it comes to the European elections and the impact that this might have, that actually lots of people have already voted through postal ballots. And so actually the impact on the results on Sunday might actually be somewhat curbed.
Okay, that's interesting. All right, let us go back to the heart of this story, to that video that started this whole crisis in Austria. Joining us now from Hamburg is Der Spiegel reporter Martin Knobe, who first published the video at the center of this story. Thanks for joining us there, Martin. So I think we all want to know, how did this video come to be in your possession? How did it come about? And for you to publish it.
Okay, I know that these questions are interesting, but of course you know that because of the confidentiality of our sources, I can't talk too much about this issue, where we get the material from and stuff like this. I can tell that we learned about the story about some month ago and knew about the situation in that finca in Ibiza, but then and we were able to watch part of the video then, but it took a while until we got into possession of the material. That happened some days ago, I think now 2 or 3 weeks ago.
How did you authenticate it and verify the content? Surely when you first saw it, it was almost too good to be true. So how did you authenticate that?
That's right. And of course, our first thought was that's fake news and that's fake material. But so that's why we asked 2 experts from outside. One is a very famous institute here in Germany, the Fraunhofer Institute, and another expert in Munich, which is who is focusing on technical forensic, and so they tested the material with 2 questions.
So that's
first,
the video. So just to say, the video you're seeing now is what Martin's talking about. Carry on, Martin.
Right. So the first question was: are the 2 people we are talking about, the Mr. Strache and Mr. Gudenos, are really on the video? Are these the right persons? And they compared, for example, the ear of Mr. Gudenos with some other pictures and came to the result that's true. He's the real person. And the other, maybe more important question was the video manipulated? Was the audio file the correct one? There was no cuts or something like that. And the result came out after some days, and it was quite clear that's not a manipulation.
Okay, and Martin, just briefly, we are all watching this and talking about the timing. Were you not suspicious about the timing of all of this? Did it not make you worry that you might have been used or are being used, as the media can be?
Of course, to be honest, journalists are all the time being used. If you get information, there's a reason why you get the information, and sometimes there's even a reason about the point of time when you get information. And of course, as a journalist, you can't choose when you get information. You get the information, and of course, the motivation of the source is it's his or her motivation. So for us, I think it's the important question that we get the information and then we take our time to verify it and to see if it's anything is manipulated, and to check it with our regular work research. And at the point when you're convinced that the information is true and verified, and then I think you as a journalist has the duty to publish it, and that was the procedure we were following on. Right. And so, of course, it's 1 week before the election. But what would be the alternative? Should we hold it back until after the election?
Right, so
I think that wouldn't be the right way.
It just took time for you to verify all that. All right, thank you very much. Martin Knobe, reporter there from Der Spiegel, who first published that video at the heart of this Austrian crisis. Thank you very much there. What do you think about the timing here? Yeah, as he said, it wasn't really up to them, but, you know, it did come out a week before the elections. Anyone suspicious about this, or even with the months that they got this?
Sure. I mean, I'm not entirely sure it came. I mean, they have said that they've known about this for a couple of months.
Yeah, sure.
And as far as I'm aware,
the question is why. And
the question is, I think, why has it taken 2 years to emerge rather than why has it happened a week before the elections? We don't know. And actually, the interesting point is that he's not willing to reveal his sources. But what we don't know is. Not that we want to know who his sources are, but do they know as a newspaper who carried out the sting? Sure. And that we still don't know the answer to that question. But ultimately, all I would say is, you know, he is right that journalists, when they're given information, can't decide to be part of the wider narrative, a part of the political game playing, that when you get the information, you have to then put it out.
And you can only do what you do, you know, the process of verifying and then deciding to publish.
If I'd like to remind you, just quickly, Spiegel had dealt with one of its biggest crises of confidence, the Relotius case, where one of its meanwhile former reporters had actually faked stories. So I think it's very good they took their time to test these things. And just the final thing, the protection of sources is a golden rule. It's a golden standard, and that's what makes a magazine like Spiegel and the Süddeutsche Zeitung that cooperates with them.
Yeah. I would agree with that, but I would also just add on, protection of sources, of course, is crucial, but it's also crucial that this newspaper and the other one are aware and know who carried out the sting. Because that is crucial to this story.
That's still the mystery in all of this. All right, let's move on. Now, with the UK's Brexit party set for big wins on Sunday, and nationalist leaders across the continent confident that the same will be true for them, well, the EU's fiery presidential candidate Guy Verhofstadt has had enough. He's got a message for one of Europe's leading populists. Let's take a listen. Guy Verhofstadt's fiery outbursts aren't much of a secret. In fact, he's known for them, but nothing gets his blood boiling more than right-wing populists like Matteo Salvini. That's why he's released this video.
Right-wing friends, Marine Le Pen, Strache, Farage, Orban are constantly plotting with and paid by Putin.
Accusing Salvini of plotting with Putin and challenging him to a diplomatic duel.
Tell me where you want to do it. In Brussels? In Italy? I will be there.
Mr. Verhofstadt isn't the only one taking a swipe at Italy's far-right leader. Weeks after calling on Europe to shun populists, the Catholic Church spotted Mr. Salvini kissing a rosary during a campaign rally and appealing to the patron saints of Europe. A barrage of criticism followed, the Church accusing him of appropriating Christian values. Macron under attack. France's president is facing criticism from Spain's left-wing populist party Podemos. Its lead candidate for the upcoming elections, Maria Eugenia Rodriguez Palop, told Euractiv that Emmanuel Macron has to acknowledge his role in the rise of Europe's far-right parties. And the only way to counter it is an alliance of left-wing parties who, quote, champion fair and social policies for all in Europe. All right, no, look, we have had in the past few days alone a lot of warnings from centrist, leftist politicians saying, oh, it's dangerous to work with populists and nationalists. This is a danger, danger, danger. Is this populist bashing actually, could it backfire? You know, you're painting them as the underdog, they're the bad guys. Could this backfire?
I think so. I think we have seen that over the past few years. Instead of, it was really interesting. I have a conversation with an MEP who said the problem is that we've been fighting the narrative in a way, but we haven't been focusing on solving the problems that actually are making people vote for them. So I think that
because they are highlighting the problems, right?
Indeed. So that's one of the things. And then another thing is that maybe we're giving them too much importance. And at some point they were not so big in the European Parliament. we've been giving them a lot of a stage, both in the media and the other political parties, because it's also fun to confront them, because sometimes you can actually have easy arguments against them because they're not prepared to have an actual conversation. But I think even if we would have this debate and we would have maybe a good exchange and you could point out that they don't have actual proposals for anything, the Liga doesn't have a program for the European elections, for instance, then you might expose them in a way, but at the same time, you're giving them a lot of exposure and a lot of visibility too.
I mean, but there's one, bashing is one thing, there's another, engagement is another thing. I mean, isn't that a problem that some people just don't want to engage?
I mean, that is true. And, you know, people would say in a democracy that if people vote for parties that you should engage with them and at least engage with their voters to try and change their minds if you politically don't disagree. Ultimately, though, politics is a game of expectation. And interesting, what will happen is this weekend is that we all are expecting populists to do well. And I'm sure they will. Salvini looks like he's going to do particularly well in Italy. The battle that's going to take place in France, will Le Pen top the polls? She may potentially do so. It looks like the Brexit Party is going to do well in the UK. But the question is not if they do well, it's how well they do. Because, as I said, the expectation is that they will do very well. If they don't, they do a little bit less than we expected. Actually, the narrative very early next week could change to how well the Greens have done in Germany, how well the Liberal middle ground may well have done. And so that's the problem for the kind of populists, is everyone's expecting them to do well. And if they don't, that narrative can very quickly change.
OK, 2 cents worth from the Austrian point of view.
With regard to the Austrian political situation in general?
On populist bashing,
on populist bashing,
them
I think
the bad
as long as centrist politicians don't engage, moderate politicians don't engage with the fundamental grievances and problems that the voters of these parties
finding the solution,
motivate them to vote for them, as long as they don't do that, the problem won't go away. And simply talking it away or putting a Nazi tag on anyone who sort of hasn't slightly or very outrageous
doesn't go down well
opinion.
with a lot of people, does it?
No, definitely not, because I think it fosters defiance and it fosters a feeling of, well, you know, we're going to stick it to the elites.
An anti-establishment defiance feeling. All right. Well, coming up on the program tonight, who has the right to decide when to take someone off life support? Well, that case is dividing France. That's coming up next. Plus, a crack in Italy's coalition as Matteo Salvini pushes a proposed law that would fine rescue groups who save migrants at sea. That's after the break. Welcome back to Raw Politics. A French court has reversed the decision to withdraw life support from a man whose case has been central to the right to die debate for over a decade now. The story has divided users online as well, and Alex and our team in the Cube have more on this story. Alex.
Do people have a right to die? And if they can't express that themselves, then who can? Or must we fight for life at all costs? Tessa, these are the questions that have come to the surface in the light of the case of Vincent Lambert. Here he is. He's a brother. He's a husband. He's a son. He's a friend. In 2008, he was involved in a tragic motorcycle accident that ever since then has left him in a vegetative state. He is completely paralyzed. Now, his wife and many of his siblings have said doctors should withdraw life support and allow him to die. But for his mum, for his parents, that is utterly unacceptable. In their Catholic faith, that is immoral. And not just for them, but also many of his friends have drawn a very different image. Look at this. This is Vincent before the accident. This website set up by his friends, where they're saying, we should see him like this. We shouldn't see him in that bed. We should see him like this. And therefore, we must fight to keep him alive. This has been a fight that has deeply divided those who love Vincent the most, and it has gone on for more than a decade. Well, just yesterday, it seemed the world was prepared for Vincent to pass. French doctors began withdrawing life support, a decision that was not overturned by the European Court of Human Rights, a decision even President Macron said he couldn't get involved in. And then at the 11th hour, the news came through that the Paris Appeals Court had overturned that ruling. This is how his parents' lawyer greeted the news that life support would be reinstated. You can see here celebrating. Some people finding these scenes deeply controversial, not just because they are celebrating keeping on that life support, but the way it is being celebrated. You can see how deeply controversial this is, how the questions come to the fore. Well, let's just bring you what some people have said. First of all, the Vatican, the Pope himself had weighed in on this. They are now saying they want swift protections to keep Vincent alive, to make sure his life support remains on. But then there are others, like Gregory here. He says, I'm a Catholic, I'm a believer, I'm on the right. But this decision, he says, je suis totalement opposé. I'm totally opposed to a vision, he says, that is from the Middle Ages. Saying here that although he's Catholic, he thinks Vincent has a right to pass. But then there are others, of course. Vincent cannot be asked. People cannot hear from him. He is in a vegetative state. There are those like Alexis here who say, in a view of the situation that Vincent Lambert has found himself in, I want to express now, I never want to be in that position. People coming forward to say, if ever this should happen to me, I want to make my thoughts, my feelings clear. I don't want to be kept alive. Now, this is a story, this is a case that has deeply divided those who feel the closest to Vincent Lambert. It's divided a nation. And more importantly, as you're seeing here, it's dividing people around the world. Tessa.
Right, thank you for that, Alex and our team in the Cube. Clearly a divisive story, two sides to the story, very strong opinions. What do you think? Who has a final say on Lambert's life? You can join in on that debate after the program on your call tonight. The contact information will be on your screen towards the end of the program, so do stay tuned. All right, let's move on to Italy now, where there's growing tension in the country's coalition after the government passed there's an anti-migrant bill being considered. And the Five Star Movement has signaled it's not prepared to support a proposed law that would fine rescue organizations thousands of euros for rescuing people off the Libyan coast. Now, for more on this, let's go to our correspondent, Giorgia Orlandi, who is in Rome. Giorgia, can you tell us more about this proposal and, the kind of rift it's causing within the Italian government?
Yes,
Giorgia, unfortunately, we're having a very bad sound coming from you, and we'll try to fix that and try to bring Giorgia back as soon as we can. But we do have a guest with us on the program who will discuss this with us, Anais Fore-Atcher. She's head of the migration unit at the Red Cross EU office. And so with us, Beatrice Rios from Euractiv and our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Just to briefly, because unfortunately we lost Giorgia there. So this is a plan that Salvini put forward to want to fine NGOs who are doing rescues at sea. But I think somewhere between 3,500 to 5,500. That's quite substantial. What kind of impact will this have for your organization like yours and the work that you do?
We are extremely worried by such trends, such EU trends, which lead towards the criminalization of humanitarian assistance. We believe that this approach of blaming, sanctioning humanitarian organizations is not the way to go. This is having a significant impact on our work. It's complicating our access to migrants, and ultimately the needs of migrants are unaddressed.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and Beatrice, you're watching this closely. You were writing about the different, migration positions of the different countries. What do you think what kind of impact do you think this will have?
I think this can have a major impact. We have seen already what the Italian government has done. They closed the docks to the search and rescue vessels that were on the Mediterranean. We'd reduce significantly the presence of humanitarian organizations in the Mediterranean. But now we're going even forward. We're going to fine those organizations for saving people's lives. So this is a threat to humanitarian action, to humanitarian intervention, and it's also a violation of the international law. It's completely unacceptable what the Italian government is doing.
From Salvini's point of view, he said that it is about if NGOs violate certain laws. Isn't that his word?
Yeah, but he's ignoring the law of the sea, which is that if people are in distress, you have to rescue them. And by finding those NGOs, you're preventing them from doing so.
Okay, let's continue this discussion. Would this push NGOs to a certain corner that NGOs don't want to find themselves in? Because this would, essentially, they would have to find a way around if a bill like this is proposed.
For us, what is extremely worrying is this association with humanitarian assistance, search and rescue operations, and criminality.
Criminalizing it,
We're really putting suspicion towards what we are doing as humanitarian actors, and it's not only leading to increasing death at sea. We all heard that this reduction of boats in the Mediterranean is leading to a higher mortality rate, but it's also putting our work at risk in terms of how the population perceives what we are doing and the legitimacy of preserving humanity.
I mean, we saw the condemnation also from the UN and, of course, from NGOs. But then from Salvini's point of view, he will say, well, this is what I do to protect our borders, to deal with the problems that our country is facing. And, yeah,
I mean, look, 1 in 8 people who've tried to make a crossing across the Mediterranean this year have died, and it doesn't get an awful lot of exposure, but there are still people dying, hundreds of people dying. In fact, I think 70 towards the end of last week. In terms of the politics of this, you know, we are in the midst of an election campaign. Clearly, the issue of migration is a big, big issue in Italy. Salvini is making what he can off it. I mean, his point would be that this in part also acts as a deterrent to try and stop people from making that crossing. But you're right, there is. And this is adding to the increased tensions there are within the coalition government, with the Five Star Movement feeling increasingly uncomfortable with the hard line taken on migration. But I think where we are, and given where Italian sentiment is, and given the fact that the EU have been unable to deal in a pan-European basis with this issue of migration, hence why, you know, countries on the front line like Italy and Italians feel that they're having to cope with the burden, as they would see it, of migration in Europe. Until those fundamentals are changed, that popular view in Italy that actually we need to do all we can, even if it means something that lots of people elsewhere would feel very uncomfortable with, well, that is still going to retain popular support.
Would this really fly, though? Or is this just part of that tactic we were talking about so close to the election to drive a wedge between the coalition government so that Salvini can form whatever he wants to form afterwards?
I think it won't. We're seeing clashes in other issues, not only on migration. It was the same on economic policy. Salvini said that he was going to violate the rules of the Stability and Growth Pact, and then the Movimento 5 Stelle said this is unacceptable, we cannot do this. Like, we're seeing the clashes before the elections, but when it comes to migration, I don't think this is going to fly, because he might eventually lose the majority in the parliament and he might not pass the law. What I think it's important is, again, that we are changing the narrative into criminalizing the work of the NGOs. Indeed, we have seen almost 15,000 people dying in the Mediterranean from 2015. And I do believe that it's partly the EU's fault that Italy is taking this stance, because indeed we have been unable to agree on a common asylum and migration policy for the past 5 years. So we also have to take that at European level and understand that we need to have a common approach on this.
And just very, very quickly, and the last word from you, you know, we talk about whether or not this is still a crisis, migration is still a crisis. It is an election issue, but is it still a crisis from your point of view?
I think it's a solidarity crisis within the EU and among EU member states, definitely.
A solidarity crisis. All right, let's end that there. Coming up on Raw Politics, Theresa May has a trick up her sleeve, a, quote, bold new Brexit plan. But will it be enough to get backing for her MPs? That's coming up next. Welcome back to Raw Politics. Now, there's exciting news for Brexit watchers who can get ready for the 4th installment of Theresa May's withdrawal bill. It's already been one of the least successful voting franchises in political history, having been roundly defeated 3 times. But Theresa May just won't let it die. And although official cross-party talks have failed, she discussed her revised Brexit plan to cabinet ministers this morning. She will present her, quote, bold new plan to MPs next month. All right, with all the latest from Westminster, we have our correspondent Tig Enright joining us. Tig, can you tell us more about this new bold plan that Theresa May has up her sleeve?
Hi, Tessa. Well, I don't know just how bold, exciting or really new this is. New is clearly how Theresa May wants us to think about it, that it's not just the withdrawal agreement reheated for a fourth time, the one that was voted down 3 times already, but it's the withdrawal agreement bundled together with a package of other sweeteners into a new withdrawal agreement bill. But it has to be said, a lot of what it contains are things that we have already heard before. There's stuff in there about workers' rights and environmental protections. Interestingly and controversially too, measures that would stop her successor from moving away from whatever is contained in the withdrawal bill if it is indeed ratified. But the biggest and most controversial among them will be what it says about a customs union. It says that there would be a plan for a temporary customs union or customs relationship that would last until the next general election here. The idea being that then a future customs union will become a general election issue, which could be put to the voters. But this sounds as if it is exactly the same as a plan proposed to the Labour leadership and rejected by them. And how much of a concession really is it when you consider that the withdrawal agreement, the transition, would involve Britain remaining in a customs union until the very beginning of 2021, and the next general election here is scheduled for May 2022 at the very latest, and it could of course be an awful lot earlier than that. So many people saying, you know, what kind of a concession really is this?
All right, Tig, what is the sense you're getting? Is this fourth time the charm? Is it going to get through?
No, I don't think so. I think a senior Labour figure, Emily Thornberry, who represents him on Foreign Affairs, put it pretty succinctly this morning when she described this as political theatre. She said it's as if she needs to have a dignified way of leaving. She's setting up her own political version of the last rites. Ultimately, what she's trying to do here is convince individual Labour MPs to back her. And certainly many of them are in constituencies, very pro-Brexit constituencies, and they'll feel under some pressure to actually help deliver Brexit. There's, you know, some estimates that there are around 20 of them. It's probably not enough, and certainly when you consider that many of the opponents within her own party, even those who came over to back the withdrawal agreement on the third time around, are now flipping back the other way. So it does seem as if she's setting herself up for failure, although going down fighting. Tessa?
All right, thank you for that, Tig Enright there. All right, joining us in the studio now, we have Nick Guttridge, a reporter from The Sun, and still with us, Beatrice Rios from Euractiv, and of course, Darren McCaffrey, our political editor. Nick, I'll start with you. Maybe you have a different take on this. Bold and new, is it?
No, not bold or new. As we heard, it's basically a lot of reheated stuff that we've already been hearing about for the last few weeks and months. The only sort of bold bit of it, if you like, is the bit that's going to go down really badly, which is this idea of tying her successor. The idea of this is that you basically Boris-proof this deal, and that reassures those kind of Labour MPs who might be, you know, inclined to vote with it anyway, to feel, OK, you know, Prime Minister Boris isn't going to come in a few weeks' time and just rip this whole thing up. But the rest of it is going to be like so much of the Brexit process over the last couple of years. It's not really going to satisfy anyone on either side.
So is this what it's about, Boris-proofing the government?
No, I think it is what Emily Thornberry had said this morning, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, about kind of Theresa May's kind of last rites passage from Downing
Because otherwise,
Street.
what's the point of doing this all over again?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's inevitability, and she probably almost certainly knows, but why not give it a last go if you can? It's possibly the move. You know, we've done so well kind of avoiding Brexit, and it is now back with a vengeance. I mean, we are already now in the UK in the midst of a leadership contest within the Conservative Party. We've got, you know, likely candidates posing with their families at home. We have got people openly declaring that they're going to stand. And we've got kind of campaign pitches with manifesto pledges happening. So, you know, over the next couple of weeks and the first week of June, when it is almost certain, politics is an unpredictable game, but almost certain that Theresa May will lose this vote, you know, that will then mean she will announce she is finally leaving Downing Street.
Formally and
talked
finally.
about it for
Right.
I don't know how long.
So,
it looks like we're now actually into the final few weeks, or at least final few months of her premiership.
is there any way that Europe is going to look at this from any different side, or it's, you know, is there a different view to this, or no? It's just
I don't think so.
Okay.
First of all, I think it's interesting the timing, because
Right.
we're like the UK is going to vote for the European elections in 2 days. So putting a proposal forward is a way also to say let's get let's go ahead with Brexit and just forget about everything even before the election, so we don't have to be part of the European Parliament. So it's interesting in a way. But then from the European perspective, they stay in wait and see mood, because there is nothing new in the proposal. And even the way it's been framed, it's never going to be accepted by the European Union, because the conditions are there, they already state them, so it's not going to move.
Dare I say it, because I've been reading about it again the last few days, hard Brexit. It's still back. It's there. It's on the cards, back on the table. What possibility?
Yeah, it's still there. We've had Simon Coveney telling the Irish cabinet today that he thinks it's more likely than ever. If you think about it, that's just a logical conclusion, because the time is still ticking down to the point where it runs out. Yeah, there will still be Brexiteers in the UK who feel, well, just wait for the inevitable. Eventually, the EU is going to get fed up of constantly extending this, and it's going to become kind of untenable for them to do that. And yeah, realistically, we're going to get to October the 31st, basically with not very much having moved on. The EU is then going to have a really tough decision to make, because what is the UK actually going to do to justify another extension? I think if you were putting a bit of money on, you'd probably say they will find a way to do it one more time until maybe next summer. But I mean, after that, you really are at kind of end game, where the same choices are going to be there that are there now.
2 days before. Yeah, go ahead, Darren.
No, I was just going to add into that the one dynamic that will have changed by October, because ultimately, Britain and the European Union will be facing the same choices, which are essentially, do we offer an extension? Is there a second referendum? Could you still revoke Article 50? Or is there no deal? And what might well change is that we will have a new Conservative leader, a new Prime Minister in the UK, most likely Boris Johnson, or certainly a Brexiteer, I think almost certainly a Brexiteer, or someone who campaigned at least for Brexit. And in those circumstances, some of them are making it clear that they would prefer to see no deal. Now, that doesn't mean the arithmetic in Parliament has changed. It doesn't mean that actually it will happen.
Just like who gets tired
But it does add
first.
on this extra layer of narrative, which again makes things really, really difficult.
Right.
But yeah, it's incredible to think that we are still saying that the UK is due to leave the European Union on October 31st, just like they were due to leave it April 12th and March 29th.
Who knows? All right, coming up, will May's new Brexit offer change anything, as we've been talking about? Well, we want to hear what you think. So your call is coming up at 7 p.m. Brussels time. The contact information, there it is on your screen. You can call us at 00800 3333 7002. You can get in on the debate. Use the hashtag #RawPolitics on all of social media. Our lines are opening very soon after the break.
Pick up the phone, it's free. When do political protests go too far?
I don't think that political violence is the most efficient way to change policy.
I'm now remembering a lot of revolutions in Europe where people threw flowers at the military.
If you start throwing milkshakes at far-right extremists, they look like the reasonable people who are attacked, right?
It's unacceptable. People should behave better.
Can we just flip this for a minute and say, what sort of politician are you? If your form of rhetoric is so offensive to so many people that they want to throw milkshakes at you.
So those were last night's highlights from your call, and we are doing it all over again tonight at the usual time, 7 p.m. Brussels time and 6 p.m. if you are in the UK and Ireland. And Darren is hosting with our correspondent Jack Parrock, along with Nick Guttridge from The Sun and Beatrice Rios from Euractiv. So Darren, what are we talking about tonight?
Well, there is not a topic that, or at least one topic you cannot have a view on, so you've got no reason not to get involved. It is a mixed bag of stories tonight. Let's have a look at what the hot topics are on your call. It's a case that has divided a family and a country. Whether French nurse Vincent Lambert's should be allowed to die. After a motorcycle accident left him in a vegetative state for more than a decade, his wife wants him removed from life supports. But his Catholic parents have launched a series of legal bids to keep him alive. A French appeals court ruled in their favour late last night. So who has the final say on Lambert's life? As the Austrian government buckles under the weight of a corruption scandal, centrist parties across Europe are warning that this is what happens when you collaborate with the far right. But just 4 days before Europe votes, and with populists predicted to make huge gains, one leading historian says the Parliament needs nationalists to make it a more accurate reflection of public opinion across the EU. What do you think? Are populists the opposition the EU Parliament needs? Emerging from failed cross-party Brexit talks and facing a potentially disastrous result at the EU elections, Theresa May's at the last chance saloon. But dangling over the cliff edge, she's got one trick left up her sleeve. Quote, bold new Brexit plan that includes provisions on customs arrangements and measures to protect workers' rights. But some MPs are clearly crying, same plan, new name. What do you think? Will May's new Brexit offer change anything? Come on, Europe, we want to hear from you. Who is the final say on Lambert's life? Are populists the opposition the EU Parliament needs? And will May's new Brexit offer change anything? And you know what to do. Pick up the phone. As we always say, it is free. 00800 333 3702. You can email us at rawpaul@euronews.com. If you are on Skype, Raw Politics is the handle. Find us there. We'd love to see your face. Or use the hashtag Raw Politics on the Facebook or the Twitter. And get in touch, join in.
Yeah, do join in. We'll all be waiting. All right, let's talk about the first story, the one in France, because it's such a divisive story. Like, who has the final say on Lambert's life? And obviously the laws differ depending on the country here in the EU. So what do you think about this case? It's been going on for a decade now.
I don't know if I would be able to answer the question, but I think the real answer is to regulate the right to die. I think if we do regulate the right to die, we wouldn't have to have these kind of conversations. We wouldn't have to have these really dramatic court cases, because we would have a regulation that would establish who has the right to say what, and you would be able to decide yourself, even before this actually happens, whether or not you want to actually keep alive in these kind of circumstances of you want to die.
And isn't it interesting that there are different interpretations? Like the ECJ said one thing, and then the local court said another thing on such a case?
Well, this is the problem, and we've had kind of cases in the UK about this as well, where the case law, it isn't really there. These are issues that are only coming up more recently. It's an incredibly difficult one, but I mean, you've kind of got to feel for his parents' position. If you've got family members who are in such a close, relationship, and they want to keep a relative alive, it's incredibly difficult to say no to that.
I mean, it is a conundrum of modern medicine in some ways, and actually a reflection of how advanced we've now become. I think ultimately the problem I would say with having the right to state, a bit like if you want to donate your organs, that you should kind of state, all of us should kind of write down on a piece of paper, if we end up in these circumstances, what you want to happen. But of course, we've all got the ability and the need and the desire to change our minds on things. It's impossible also to say at what stage would you have to be in for that kind of letter to enact itself. And in those circumstances, I would put that you should act on the kind of or err on the edge of conservatism, which is essentially if a family is divided and some of them want to keep the son, the daughter, the father, whatever, alive, that in those circumstances, you should probably err with them.
Well, I don't know. What do you think? Join in the conversation. You remember, use the hashtag #RawPolitics. And again, you can call us for free, so jump in. It's 00800 333 7002. The email is rawpaul@euronews.com. And again, rawpolitics as hashtag on all of social media. And you can also look for us on Skype. So do join that debate. All right, time now for tonight's Raw Moment, and you may have heard about it yesterday. Nigel Farage a bit shaken up on the campaign trail. Let's take a look.
Right, okay, good stuff. Oh, not again. Take away, get back to the car. Complete failure. Spotted that up. Sorry.
I was looking at the reactions on Twitter to this one. I mean, regardless of whether you agree with his politics or not, like some people were didn't really appreciate that it's a line.
He was royally annoyed. I mean, not least of all with the security.
Where do you draw the line on,
Yeah, I mean, that's an ongoing debate about, should you be allowed to chuck things at politicians if they're not going to cause any harm. I have to say, though, that was not just any milkshake. That was a caramel, banana...
£6.
€6
there you go.
milkshake. I mean, my word.
That's still another divisive topic there. Keep trending on Twitter. All right, we would like to hear your views on everything we're talking about. Again, get in touch. Stay tuned after the program for your call. Use the hashtag #RawPolitics. Thanks for watching tonight. See you soon.